There are plenty of reasons that a prestige television adaptation can suddenly dominate the cultural conversation. HBO's marketing muscle, attractive lead actors, a sports setting that signals seriousness instead of fluff. But none of that fully explains why the HBO adaptation of Heated Rivalry has struck such a deep nerve for women viewers. In particular, many straight women and feminists who do not usually gravitate towards romance at all. This is not passive media consumption. Viewers are dissecting the scenes, replaying the moments of emotional vulnerability, and talking less about the sex, the conversation everybody else is talking about, and more about how that relationship or those relationships feel comfortable, relieving, different. Those are not the words people usually use for television romance. The easy explanation arrives on cue and solves absolutely nothing. Women like the show because they are fetishizing gay men. Case closed. No, that explanation collapses the moment you pay attention to how the show is actually being discussed. Fetishization does not produce emotional safety. It does not produce a sense of rest. And it certainly doesn't explain why so many women say they are tired of watching straight couples on screen altogether. We're talking about Heated Rivalry today. Before we get started, you know what to do. Love or hate, like and share, because the algorithm does not care. What Heated Rivalry offers is not transgression, it's escape. The fetishization argument is popular because it's clean and simple. It frames women as unserious consumers and allows critics to dismiss the phenomenon without actually engaging it, which is the way we usually think when women like something. We always belittle or devalue that thing, whether it's a book or a movie. If women like it, somehow it's suddenly not serious. But the fetishization argument fails on a basic descriptive level. The response to Heated Rivalry is not about novelty or taboo. It's about resonance. The group of viewers I'm talking about are not fixating on the bodies of the male leads. They are fixating on the relationship dynamics, on the way that conflict unfolds in a way that is not gendered, on the way intimacy is allowed to exist without the background hum of threat, on how the show feels oddly peaceful even when the characters are fighting. I want to jump in a minute and talk about the sex for a second. The sex stands out precisely because it's not driven by coercion, conquest, or emotional leverage. They make it very clear when they're about to or they want to have a sexual interaction what precise kind of sex they're talking about. So one of the elements of consent is that the consent has to be specific. The consent is very specific. It is very direct. For Shane and Ilya, desire unfolds through mutual checking in rather than assumption. During the sex itself, particularly the first time that they have penetrative sex, Ilya constantly checks in with Shane to make sure that he's okay. It'd be nice if straight men did that. And it's not being done in a performative way. It's a natural extension of respect. Consent isn't a hurdle to clear once and then forget. It's something that's ongoing. It's conversational and responsive. The result is intimacy that actually feels grounded instead of extractive. Like there's no pressure involved, no coercion. It's free from that very, very familiar heterosexual script where persistence is mistaken for passion. I mean, there's tension, but it's not coercive or manipulative. Moving on. If this were merely about erotic spectacle, the reaction would be shallow and fleeting. But instead, women are watching slowly. We're rewatching and analyzing scenes for emotional openness. We're talking about it with our friends, and we're recommending the show to friends, particularly friends who are burned out on dating and burned out on the familiar scripts of heterosexual romance. That response points to something structural, not something voyeuristic. Straight romance on television does not exist in a vacuum. It imports the real world into every storyline, whether it intends to or not. Gendered power imbalance, economic inequality, cultural permission for male aggression, the omnipresent reality of gendered violence. Even when the male characters are written as gentle or progressive, viewers do not forget what world they live in. We know how often men hurt women. We know how often control is disguised as passion. We know how often female desire comes with risk rather than reward. So watching straight romance becomes an exercise in vigilance. Viewers are scanning for red flags, we're bracing for disappointment, and we're waiting for the inevitable moment when the woman is asked to compromise more, forgive more, endure more, shrink herself smaller. Even fictional love stories demand emotional labor. And for many women, that labor has stopped feeling entertaining. It just feels like work we don't want to do anymore. The central relationship in Heated Rivalry functions differently at a structural level, and that difference is the entire point. Shane and Ilya are equals in every way that matters. They play the same professional sport. They have the same level of fame. They have about the same amount of money. They have comparable physical power. Neither holds institutional authority over the other. Neither is socially conditioned to dominate or submit to the other. This matters for more than representation or novelty. It creates a relationship space where conflict does not automatically signal danger. When they clash, it is about ego, but it's also about fear and desire, but it's never about control. Neither of them are trying to control the other. When they hurt each other, it is emotionally painful, but not socially familiar in the way that heterosexual harm often is. The show offers a vision of romance without hierarchy, and discerning viewers feel that difference immediately. Women are trained to experience intimacy through a threat model. We're taught to monitor male emotions, to anticipate escalation, to read subtext for signs of danger. That training does not switch off when we turn on the TV. It shapes how we watch every straight couple that we see on screen. Heated Rivalry removes women from that position entirely so that we are no longer identifying with the structurally vulnerable partner. We're no longer negotiating safety on someone else's behalf. We're simply watching two people want each other. This does not require idealized characters. Shane and Ilya are emotionally guarded, they're competitive, and they're sometimes cruel, but their flaws never collapse into gendered power. The absence of patriarchal dynamics changes the emotional stakes of every interaction they have. Intimacy feels playful instead of precarious. Conflict feels survivable instead of ominous. Think about the romantic story in Heated Rivalry versus that in Bridgerton season 4. The contrast reveals something crucial about what women are responding to and what they are rejecting. Both stories are framed as passionate. Both promise emotional intensity. Both are visually lush, but they are doing fundamentally different things with power. In Heated Rivalry, Shane and Ilya meet as equals. In Bridgerton, the romance between Benedict Bridgerton and Sophie Beck is built on asymmetry from the start. Not just emotional asymmetry, but class, gender, and economic imbalance. That imbalance is not incidental. It's what drives the entire story. Shane and Ilya's relationship is not about rescue. No one needs to be saved from poverty, a life of service, or social ruin. Neither partner has control over the other's survival. Their conflict emerges from rivalry, fear of vulnerability, and professional stakes that they both fully understand, and they are both equally equipped to deal with. This is why their intimacy feels so refreshing, because the audience never has to worry that one partner could destroy the other's life by withdrawing affection or protection or legitimacy. The relationship exists on a level playing field. When they hurt each other, the harm is emotional, but their physical safety or long-term survival is not affected. This allows the viewer to focus on desire itself, on longing, resistance, jealousy, tenderness. The story doesn't force the audience to tolerate inequality in exchange for romance. The Sophie and Benedict storyline from Bridgerton operates on entirely different logic. Sophie enters the narrative as vulnerable by design. Her situation is economically precarious. She is socially invisible, and she is dependent. Benedict is not just her love interest. He's her exit strategy from poverty or a life of indentured servitude. This is a traditional feature of this genre. It's the Cinderella story, and the Cinderella structure depends on rescue. The romance is believable precisely because one partner has power and the other does not. And this is precisely where a growing number of women disengage. I have to admit that since I began doing this work, reading more and making more of the type of content I do, I struggle to become invested in these kinds of stories. I can't really enjoy them anymore. I am not watching Bridgerton and enjoying it in the same way I did now as I did in season 1. Even in its most romanticized form, these kind of stories ask the audience to root for inequality as long as the story resolves kindly. Sophie's happiness is contingent on Benedict's recognition, Benedict's choice, his generosity. And because of that, love becomes indistinguishable from mercy. And for viewers who are already tired of negotiating power in their own lives, this is an escapism. This just looks like a Tuesday with some dude you've been dating. The key difference between these romances is not the tone or the setting, it is the presence of a threat model. In Bridgerton, the audience is always aware that Sophie can lose everything at any time. Her safety depends on male behavior remaining benevolent. That knowledge creates narrative tension, but it also creates emotional strain for the viewer. In Heated Rivalry, by contrast, no such calculation exists. The audience is not bracing for systemic harm at every episode. There's no moment where desire has to be weighed against survival. This is why so many women describe Heated Rivalry as a breath of fresh air and Bridgerton as stressful to watch or annoying to watch, even though Bridgerton is the series that is designed as escapist fantasy. The Sophie Benedict story arc ultimately hinges on gratitude. Sophie's love is entangled with relief, with safety, with the knowledge that her life will only improve if a powerful man chooses her and for no other reason. By contrast, Heated Rivalry offers a romance that requires no gratitude for survival. No one owes anyone their future. Love is chosen because it is wanted, not because it's a necessity. This distinction matters deeply to women who are already exhausted by social scripts that frame male partnership as provision rather than mutual desire. Exhausted by the idea that romantic love in a heterosexual context requires them to surrender their humanity. But here's what the comparison between these two shows really reveals. When women gravitate toward Heated Rivalry and hesitate around Bridgerton's central romance, they're not rejecting heterosexual love. They're rejecting rescue narratives disguised as love. They're not asking for the perfect man or for a conflict-free story. They're asking for intimacy without dependency, for desire without hierarchy, love that does not require submission as an entry fee. In that sense, Heated Rivalry is offering a vision of a relationship that straight, classed, and gendered narratives still struggle to imagine. And that's why it kind of feels like a pop culture Trojan horse. The enthusiasm for Heated Rivalry fits into a broader cultural pattern. Women withdrawing from patriarchy, disengaging from dating, decentering men, women expressing boredom with straight romantic plots, and openly questioning whether heterosexual partnership is worth the emotional cost that it demands. This is usually dismissed as bitterness, but it's not bitterness, it's exhaustion. What women are withdrawing from is not love, but the expectation that love must involve constant risk management, constant man-keeping, that desire must be paired with self-surveillance, that romance requires constant emotional labor with no guarantee of safety or reciprocity. When a television show offers intimacy without those conditions, we notice, and then we discover what the fantasy really is. This is where the conversation tends to derail, because the fantasy at the center of Heated Rivalry is not men, and it's not masculinity. The fantasy is a relationship unaffected by gender hierarchy. That's the fantasy. A relationship where no one is socially entitled to power, where no one is structurally vulnerable by default, where desire does not have to be negotiated around fear, and where love doesn't come preloaded with inequality. The queerness of the relationship is what makes all of that possible, but queerness is not the object of desire. The object of desire is equality. Straight romance on screen is struggling because it has not reckoned with patriarchy's residue. Even updated, progressive stories still rely on those familiar bargains. Male story arcs that are centered on female patience, emotional labor reframed as devotion, inequality softened by charm. They may have racially inclusive casting, but the stories are largely the same. Female audiences feel this even when they can't really name it. And increasingly, they're opting out. When a show like Heated Rivalry captures attention, it does so by revealing what we've been missing rather than by offering something shocking or sexually provocative. We can use the success of the Heated Rivalry adaptation as a diagnostic tool. When women stop believing in even fictional straight romance, it's not because they've rejected intimacy, it's because patriarchy makes intimacy too costly. And for the first time in a long time, television has offered us a glimpse of what it actually might feel like if it wasn't. Thanks for watching. See you next time. If you enjoy this kind of content, I invite you to watch my series, Witches, Whores, and Rebels, a feminist history of patriarchal capitalism and how to burn it down. It's a 3-part series with a 90-page companion guide that gives you the history of how we got here, centering the witch hunts, women's resistance, and providing a framework for how we move forward from here. The link is in the description when you're ready.